I received a call from my husband, Joe, in the middle of the night while I was on a business trip abroad. "Hey, just divorce me already." I froze, saying, "Wait, what?" I had anticipated this moment, but never expected it to come while I was abroad. "What do you mean? Can you explain it to me?" Then Joe snorted with laughter. "You probably didn't notice, but I'm with someone new. She's younger and cuter than you, and we've got a kid already." As I remained silent, Joe continued. "So, I'm going to live with her and our kid. I've sold the house and the car." With a smug look, he waited for my response, to which I simply said, "Okay." "What?" Joe murmured. Perhaps he thought I would cry and lose my composure? That was wishful thinking. I had been prepared for this for a long time. So a situation like this wouldn't faze me. A few days later, when I returned home, there was Joe, half crazed at the airport. "My name is Sherry Hansen. I'm a 34-year-old working housewife. I was born and raised in a typical middle-class family in the US. But I started attending Spanish conversation classes from elementary school because I liked learning Spanish. In middle school, I was top of my class in Spanish. And in high school, I experienced a homestay in Spain. Eventually, I dreamed of working for a multinational company and went to a prestigious university to study business management. I studied abroad during college and steadily climbed the steps towards my dream. During my job search, I worked hard, and although I didn't get into my first choice company, I received an offer from my second choice, a multinational company. At that time, not only was I overjoyed, but so was my family. My sister Kelly said, "That's my sister Sherry. I'm so proud of you. Just remember to take care of yourself when you dive into your job." I nodded and thanked my beloved family who supported me. Once I started working, the job was more demanding than I imagined. The company was what you'd call good standing, but the quality of work required was high, and in my early 20s, I often had to work overtime. However, I was always supported by wonderful bosses and colleagues, and I felt fulfilled by the job I had always wanted to do. Years of dedication to my work were recognized, and gradually, I was entrusted with more important tasks. My friends often said, "Sherry is straight on the path to becoming a career woman. And you're really cool, such a strong woman." Despite being perceived this way, I had a soft spot for cute things. I collected merchandise of my favorite characters and slept with stuffed animals. I couldn't keep a pet due to my busy schedule, but I often went to cat cafes on weekends to relax. I usually kept a sharp image at work, so I didn't show this side to others. But I had a strong desire to be healed because of my busy work life. As I approached my late 20s, more and more people around me got married and had children. I was frequently invited to friends' weddings, where people would tell me, "Sherry, you should get married soon too," but I always replied, "I'm too busy with work." Although I was focused on work, I couldn't develop romantic feelings for men at work or clients. And I had no other opportunities for encounters. Am I going to stay single forever? At that time, however, I thought that was fine. Living for work wasn't so bad. One day, I was invited to yet another friend's wedding. As usual, I wrapped the congratulatory money and applauded. But even so, I felt a bit anxious. I was over 30. If I were to consider marriage. The wedding reception continued, and I went to the bar at the venue. While watching the lively participants and the bride and groom who were shyly smiling from a distance, I was drinking alone at the counter when, "Are you alone? May I sit next to you?" Out of nowhere, a voice came up to me that felt like it belonged to a voice actor, what people usually call a sweet voice. "Yeah, of course." While responding, I looked at the man who sat next to me. He was about my height, which is tall for a woman, and looked younger than me. He had a normal face, in a good way, that didn't match his voice. "Are you a guest at this wedding?" I replied, I'm a friend of the bride. I'm a high school friend of the groom. Would you like to have a drink together? I nodded, and as we drank, I talked with Joe. Whoa, you're with that big international firm? I've heard of it too. That's really impressive. Here I am, just a normal guy working at a small place. And you feel like you're in a different league. The man who introduced himself as Joe Hansen and I hit it off. Eventually, we exchanged contact information before parting. And started meeting privately. Joe was 2 years younger than me and worked in sales at a small company. He was kind and gentle. Additionally, he was a good listener and flatterer. And I enjoyed conversing with him. After several dates, Joe confessed his feelings for me, and I gladly accepted. Joe's annual income was less than a third of mine. But at that time, it didn't bother me at all. As we got closer, I realized how adorable Joe was. There's a saying from a drama that goes, "Cute is the strongest." And that really resonated with me. If I had seen him as just cool or dependable, I might have felt let down sometimes. But because he was so cute, I could overlook the small stuff. Being younger and always earnest, Joe was endearing, and whenever he acted spoiled, saying, "I want to eat your cooking," I would gladly oblige with a smile. After dating for about a year and a half, Joe proposed to me, saying, "Sherry, I always think you're cool, but sometimes you're cute too. I'd love it if you would marry me." I was surprised, but happily accepted the ring. Thank you, Joe. I'm looking forward to our life together as husband and wife. Joe cheered, yes, and I smiled at his reaction. Later, we went to greet each other's parents about our marriage. Joe's parents were kind and simple people, and they blessed our marriage. My family was generally positive, and they told Joe, "Please take good care of Sherry." My already married sister quietly told me, "Sherry, the one who likes cute things, would choose someone like this. But remember, don't spoil your husband too much." I laughed at my sister's words and replied, "I know." Thus, Joe and I started living together. I decided to buy an apartment as soon as we got married. It was a big purchase that required courage. But I thought it was better considering our future. We chose a slightly spacious four-room property so it would be comfortable even if we had children. I thought our sweet life together with Joe was about to begin. But I was about to face a harsh reality. Joe could hardly do any household chores. Since he had lived with his parents until we got married, he had always relied on his mother for housework. So I thought it couldn't be helped. I told Joe, "Joe, now that we're married, let's share the housework. If you don't know how, I'll teach you." When I said this, Joe frowned. Come on, Sherry. Now that we're married, shouldn't you be the one doing the housework?" I firmly responded, "No. I'm too busy with my job. You need to learn at least the basics. Come on, get up. I'll show you how to use the washing machine." Reluctantly, Joe got up, and I began to drill the essentials of housekeeping into him. However, Joe continued to skip chores. He started doing cleaning and laundry. But only half-heartedly, and I often had to redo them. His cooking was disastrous. And in the end, I managed by preparing meals in advance. Trying not to discourage Joe, I avoided harsh words. Instead, I praised him even for his incomplete attempts. It was a strategy of encouragement through praise. However, Joe took advantage of this and began to slack off more in his chores. Unable to bear it anymore, I confronted him. "Joe, stop taking advantage of me. You need to be able to do housework properly. I'm busy with work, and I have business trips. You need to be able to manage on your own, right?" Joe's expression soured. "What's with you, Sherry? You've changed since we got married. Always nagging. Since you earn well, why don't we just outsource the housework?" I was dumbfounded. Just because I earn more than my peers doesn't mean money can be wasted like water. However, no matter how many times we discussed it, Joe's reluctance to do housework remained unchanged. 1 year into our marriage, when I returned home, I found Joe with a pale face. "Joe, what's wrong? You look awful." When I said this, Joe began to speak. "The company is going bankrupt due to the recession. I'm going to be unemployed starting next month." I exclaimed, "Say what?" I knew he had been working overtime for the past 6 months. But I had no idea his company was in such bad shape. "So, what are you going to do now? Any plans for a new job?" "I'll give it some thought while I'm getting unemployment benefits. I'm pretty drained and dealing with some mental stuff, so I want to take my time." I decided to leave Joe alone. As he said, he would receive unemployment benefits. So there was no need to rush. However, once he no longer had to go to work due to the company's bankruptcy, he started spending all day playing video games. Even when I came home late, the housework wasn't done. And all I saw was Joe engrossed in video games. This situation continued for several months, and I gradually became irritated. "Joe, you've had enough rest, haven't you? Isn't it time to start working?" However, Joe responded, I want to think carefully about the next job." If you think about it, I was just being exploited at my previous job. Next, I want to do something more about self-realization." I felt like retorting, "What is that?" but I couldn't just grab Joe by the scruff of his neck and drag him to the job center. I ended up taking care of Joe, who just lazed around at home even after his unemployment benefits ran out. One day, while Joe was engrossed in his game, I said sarcastically, "If you love gaming so much, why don't you try streaming? You could probably make some money." Then, Joe's eyes lit up. "That's a great idea. As expected of you, Sherry, you're smart. I'll try streaming. I have a good feeling about this." I wondered if it was really a good thing that Joe, who had been slacking off until now, was motivated. "So, if that's how it is, can you get me a computer and some gear for streaming games?" I was surprised and exclaimed, "What?" but Joe said it as if it were nothing. "I don't have any savings, so please, I'm serious about this." Reluctantly, I bought the equipment Joe requested. Becoming a streamer isn't supposed to be easy, I thought. Maybe if Joe saw the reality, he would get serious about working. However, a few months later, the situation took an unexpected turn. Joe, as the gamer Joe, became popular and started ranking in the charts. Online reactions included comments like "great voice" and "his poor gameplay is actually fun." And he was gaining popularity among both men and women. Notably, Joe kept his face half hidden and did not disclose that he was married. "See, I told you I can do it if I try. The world has finally recognized my value." Joe was very proud, showing no hint of gratitude towards me who had supported him and bought the equipment. "Joe, it's great that you've succeeded. So, could you please contribute some of the money you've earned from streaming to our household expenses?" Joe hadn't contributed to the household finances since his unemployment benefits ended. Naturally, now that he could earn money, I directly asked him to contribute. "What? We can manage with just your income, Sherry. Let's keep our finances separate." I was stunned, but Joe actually started keeping the money he earned from streaming for himself. By this time, Joe had completely lost the sincerity he had during our courtship and was entirely dependent on me. By the way, I had bought a car around this time. It was a dream foreign car I had bought on a loan. I only drove it on weekends, but I cherished it like a treasure. "Hey, let Sherry's car be driven by me too." One day, Joe said this, so I asked him, "You only stream at home and don't use it for work, right?" Joe insisted, "We're a couple, so it's fine." Eventually, I handed over the car keys to him. After that, Joe started going out freely during the weekdays when I was not home. His popularity as a streamer was skyrocketing, and by then, he had gained a large number of followers. His private life became more extravagant. And he started wearing branded clothes. I was saddened by the changed Joe. However, since we were a couple, I continued that lifestyle for several years. When our marriage reached its 4th year, I was entrusted with an important position at work, and my business trips increased. I would be away from home for a few days to up to 3 weeks. But all that awaited me when I returned was a house that looked like a dump. Joe was holed up in his room, immersed in streaming. He still relied entirely on me for living, and we hardly had any conversations as a couple. I started to wonder, why am I still married to Joe? And thus, I began to gather the materials necessary for a divorce and prepare for it. One day, I was scheduled to go on a 2-week business trip abroad. "Joe, I'm heading abroad again tomorrow." I said this, but Joe didn't respond, busy with his phone. Then I boarded the plane and spent my days working hard at the business trip location. However, 10 days later, in the middle of the night, Joe called me. "Hello, Joe. Think about the time difference. It's the middle of the night here," I said groggily, and Joe started with something shocking. "Hey, just divorce me already." I froze, saying, "What?" I had anticipated this moment, but never expected it to come while I was abroad. "What do you mean? Can you explain it to me?" Then Joe snorted with laughter. "You probably didn't notice, but I'm with someone new. She's younger and cuter than you, and we've got a kid already." As I remained silent, Joe continued. "So, I'm going to live with her and our kid. I've sold the house and the car." With a smug look, he waited for my response, to which I simply said, "Okay." "What?" Joe murmured. Perhaps he thought I would cry and lose my composure? That was wishful thinking. I had been prepared for this for a long time. "You want a divorce, right?" "Understood. There's a divorce form already filled out and signed in the living room drawer. Please take it out." I said this matter-of-factly, and Joe responded as if trying to act tough. "Wait, you actually had the divorce papers all set? That's hilarious. Well, I guess this is it. Enjoy your miserable, sad life, left by your husband." I almost burst out laughing as I replied, Okay. I'm going back to sleep then. Goodbye." And with that, I hung up the phone unilaterally and blocked Joe's number. I then called my sister in the US to ask for a favor and slept soundly until morning. From the next day, I got back to work as usual and worked hard until the last day. Finally, the day came for me to return home. The business class seat arranged by the company was comfortable, and I fell asleep again. I slept well. No jet lag, seems like I can get back to routine. I woke up refreshed as the plane landed, stretched, and then disembarked. After picking up my luggage at the airport, I was about to exit the lobby when, "Hey, Sherry." Someone was running towards me. It was a frantic Joe. "Oh, why are you here? I don't recall asking for you to pick me up." I said this, and Joe, nearly hysterical, blurted out, "What are you doing?" "Because of the car and the house. Thanks to you, I was taken aback by his unusual demeanor. "I don't understand what you're trying to say. Can I go now? I'm tired." As I yawned and tried to walk past Joe, he blocked my way. "Just wait. Listen to me," Joe shouted, so I stopped. Let me explain from the beginning. First, I did submit the divorce form after that. "Okay," I replied nonchalantly, playing with my phone without making eye contact with Joe. "Are you listening?" After that, a real estate agent was supposed to come for the house sale. So I returned home after submitting the divorce form. But there was a lock on the outside of the door, and I couldn't get in. Then, because I had no other option, I tried to go to our other house. But there was a padlock like a theft prevention lock on the car's tire. And I couldn't drive it. I tried calling you, but you didn't answer. You blocked my calls, didn't you? I sighed at that point. Yes, I blocked your calls, so? Joe stomped his feet in frustration, his face turning red. You put the lock on the house and the tire lock too. How did you manage that while you were abroad? I casually answered. I asked my sister to handle it. Joe widened his eyes in shock. Your sister? Yes, you said you sold the house and the car, right? But I had my sister check. And they were still there. You probably just got an appraisal or something. And lied about selling them, right? As I said this, Joe's face turned red again. That's true, but I was just about to sell them. It's all your fault now. I couldn't help but look exasperated. No, either way, you couldn't have sold them, right? Both the house and the car are in my name. And all the necessary documents for the sale are at my parents' house. Joe looked dumbfounded. Did you really think someone who isn't the owner could just say, I'm selling this, and sell a house or car that easily? Of course. They have to check if you're the legitimate owner, and there's paperwork involved, right? Joe was at a loss for words, his mouth agape. Throughout our entire marriage, you always handed off the annoying paperwork to me. That's why you're clueless about such simple stuff. I said this disdainfully, and Joe's eyes narrowed in anger. If you knew it couldn't be sold, why did you put locks on the car and house? Thanks to you, I couldn't enter the house or drive the car, and it was a huge hassle. I sighed and replied. Who would want to let a husband who's planning a divorce and has a mistress into their own house? The same goes for the car. It's in my name, and I just did it for security reasons. Joe glared at me with bloodshot eyes. What? That look. Just because you couldn't freely sell my stuff. You're making that face at me? You're really not cute at all. That's what I hated about you. Always acting like you can do everything by yourself, so arrogant for a woman. I responded calmly, oh really? That's right. I shouldn't have married you then. Joe snorted through his nose. That's because I was after your money. Working for a multinational. And earning a lot, that was the only benefit of marrying you. Joe's intention to hurt me was clear, but it had no effect on me. If you think about it, there was never any benefit for me in marrying you. When I said this earnestly, Joe became enraged. What are you so proud of? Fine, I'll dump you. My mistress is hundreds of times cuter. And she's even had my child. You must be bitter. Knowing my mistress is superior to you as a woman. I almost laughed. Superior to me? Haha. As Joe said, what? I pulled out a photo from my bag. This is your mistress, right? Tracy Foster? I showed him a photo of a young woman in her early 20s, looking cute. Joe's eyes darted back and forth. What? You knew about Tracy? Then I smiled and explained. I wanted a divorce just as much as you did. I had already been gathering materials for it. You were careless, weren't you? Didn't you know that the dash cam in the car records video? Joe turned pale, but I continued unabated. It was easy to find out when you met from the dash cam footage. I just had to ask a detective agency to gather evidence. It was easy to identify your mistress, especially since she was already pregnant. As I spoke, Joe was stunned but soon tried to recover. Don't do anything to her. She's having a hard time after the birth. She's young and doesn't have any money. Besides, she didn't know I was married. I exaggerated how much I frowned. Wow, you're so protective of her. You really love Tracy, don't you? Of course. She's pure, cute, my soulmate. I'll protect her and our child no matter what. In front of the impassioned Joe, I played a video. It was from the dash cam inside my car. In it, Joe was driving my car with a heavily pregnant Tracy beside him. Joe, thanks for taking me on a drive again today. The food was delicious too. Tracy said in a sweet voice, and Joe grinned. Tracy, you're fantastic at being grateful. You're such a great girl. I can't wait to spend my life with you. Then Tracy pouted. Seriously. Hurry up and divorce that old hag and become my husband. Our baby is coming soon, after all. Just wait a little longer. I'll sort everything out while she's on her business trip. Then we can live happily with you and this child. We can even splurge with the money from selling the house and car. I stopped the playback there. Tracy, you knew he was married, right? Joe was pale. To him, I dropped another bombshell. And yet so pure? What does pure even mean? Joe yelled, what are you trying to say? Here, look at this. It's the investigation result for Tracy. Take a good look. I scattered several photos on the floor, and as Joe looked down at them, his complexion worsened. What is this? Who are these men? The photos showed Tracy with several men, linking arms intimately, entering a hotel, and even one where she was at an obstetrician's office, with a man who was not Joe. That's the real Tracy. She's been targeting famous streamers for relationships. You started as just a streamer and a fan, didn't you? Joe froze, unable to say a word, kneeling and staring at the photos in disbelief. I spoke in a tone as if I was sympathizing. It's impressive of you. Raising a child whose father might be unknown. Joe muttered as if in a trance. That can't be. Tracy said it was only me. This can't be happening. I looked down at Joe expressionlessly. He looked hollowed out. I spoke to him. Can I go now? We're already strangers, right? Is there anything else to discuss? Joe was startled and began shouting at me. If you hadn't shown me these things, I could have been happy. How malicious can you be? Your actions made me distrust everything. I couldn't help but show an exasperated face. That's not my problem. Do you even realize what you're saying? Well, fine. Even if I divorce you and break up with Tracy, I'll be happy. As a streamer, I have over 2 million followers, and I'm earning more money than you now. Too bad for you, losing a husband who's a famous streamer. Serves you right. Then, I smiled sweetly and suggested. Why don't you check your phone now? Joe said, huh, and pulled out his phone. His face turned even paler as he looked at it. What's this? Over 1,000 notifications. What's going on? Joe, after manipulating his phone, looked at me in shock. No. Sherry, you didn't. Then, I said with the biggest smile of the day. Yes. I spilled everything online about you being married, having a mistress and a secret child, and how horribly you treated me. Joe screamed in a voice that echoed through the airport lobby, attracting attention. This time, Joe truly lost it. What are you doing to me? My reputation. My followers. I'm getting bombarded with messages like worst man ever and betrayed. I held up my smartphone mockingly. By the way, this is currently being live streamed. Wow, there are over 1 million viewers right now. Joe frantically tried to snatch the phone from me, but it was too late. His vile outburst and his breakdown were already exposed to the public. Joe started flailing on the airport lobby floor, so I casually walked past him and made my way to the taxi line. After that, Joe became a huge scandal on the internet. Originally, he had been a popular streamer known for his good voice. Supposedly single and kind-hearted, and had many female fans. However, just the fact that he was married was enough to shock his female fans, feeling betrayed. Furthermore, having a mistress and a secret child branded him as unfaithful, and he was criticized even by male fans. Fueling the fire. Hiding his marital status, having a mistress and a secret child while betraying his wife. However, the child might not even be his, a scandal-packed situation for Joe that even people who didn't know him before found amusing, turning him into an internet joke. Joe tried to post an apology on social media, but the controversy did not subside, and his subscriber count continued to drop. eventually forcing him to halt his activities. Some time later, after I left my office building, Joe was waiting for me, sobbing. I can't even stream or walk outside anymore. Sherry, help me. I truly love only you. Let's start over as husband and wife. I replied to Joe's frantic call by telling him what I thought. If you keep bothering me, I'll call the police. Since then, I haven't seen Joe. I heard through the grapevine that the child Tracy bore wasn't actually Joe's. Amidst the turmoil, Joe and Tracy broke up. I ruthlessly demanded compensation from both of them. Joe paid with what little savings he had, and Tracy had her parents pay on her behalf. Apparently, Tracy tried to pressure another streamer, the father of the child, to marry her, but was rejected and is now being strictly cared for by her parents, raising her child. I hope that innocent child grows up healthy. As for Joe, after paying me the compensation, he ended up broke, and was then sued for damages by the companies he had partnerships with for tarnishing their image. With no one to rely on and no savings left, Joe tried to turn to his in-laws, but his decent in-laws had declared their disownment. Thus, having lost his status, honor, money, and even his family, Joe now lives in a rundown apartment, practically a broken man. Even knowing all this, I can't feel any sympathy for him. Meanwhile, I returned to being single and continued to work hard as usual. I decided to sell the condominium I had lived in with Joe, as I couldn't bear to live there anymore, and surprisingly, the property's value had increased over the years, enriching my finances. The car that Joe and Tracy had used, I sold to an acquaintance, and with that money, I bought a new car. When things settled down, my sister, who had helped me, said, "Sherry, well done. Think of him as a dog that bit you and forget about him quickly. Be happy. And don't choose a man just because he's cute anymore, okay?" Honestly, this whole situation taught me a lot. Maybe it's best if I skip the whole marriage thing. Focusing on my job feels like a better fit for me. Now, I live in a new apartment suitable for a single person that I recently bought. This property allows pets, and with work stabilizing, I plan to fulfill a long-time dream of getting a cat. From now on, I want to cherish what remains for me and live positively.